All right. So just to get us out of the gate a little bit, wanted to do a quick review on the financial aid process. Just, looking at that 40,000 foot level of where we want to be and what we're really advising families on all different spectrums of the process. We're doing a little bit right now, obviously, dealing with, some of the seniors. And getting them all wrapped up in terms of their end of their senior year and their college transition. But we're also starting to get a lot of influx of questions from those junior families who are getting ready for their student senior year. So dealing with a lot of different pieces at different parts of this process. But, starting at that creating an account, the FSA ID, this is generally where we've been telling these junior families at this point what they can do to get started, especially those families that are, kind of anxious to start this process and have been hearing a lot about what's been going on with the FAFSA in the past year. So this is, the great place to get started. It's that username and password that you need to use to electronically sign and submit these FAFSA documents and really use the federal student aid sites. We always tell families to remember that they're going to need access to this for anywhere in a neighborhood of even, up to 14 years of access, particularly if they go about the route of taking out any sort of federal student loans. So, really harping on remembering that information, writing it down, and, getting them started. Obviously, the next step is completing the FAFSA. We've been telling students, keep an eye out for that around October 1st when it's coming out in the fall. Again, we can't say with all certainty that it will be in on October 1st, ready to go. But we're really, really hopeful that that will be the reality. But either way, we're telling people to keep their eyes open in the fall for the FAFSA to be launched. At that point, they'll also be doing the work and applying for their colleges. Of course, reminding families that it's important regarding the deadlines. So keep an eye on that. Again, not just for those application pieces, but also for those the financial aid side is critically important. And reminding them that the buckets are only so big in terms of what's available to families. At that point, after the families have filled out their FAFSA, they have the opportunity to have that sent off to up to 20 colleges, depending on what schools they opted to list it on that form. And then once they're accepted, the schools then will send out that financial aid offer to the student. So this is where we're looking at right now with most of the senior families in terms of where they sit. This is what we're working with a lot of students and their families on at this point. So between that and just double checking their FAFSA submission summaries as they come in, just to make sure that there aren't any errors that they're experiencing on that piece. And making sure that if there are, they get updated so that they really are getting those accurate reflections of their financial aid offers that are going to be relayed to the student. So at this point, once those financial aid offers start coming in, that's when families will start wanting to compare those financial aid offers and start having a look at what that net price is. So we'll talk a little bit about that today and in terms of why we find it so important to break out that net price piece as well as explain it to families pretty thoroughly in terms of how that's different from sticker price and why that's such a critical portion. Comparing these financial aid offers in the best of times can be exciting and stressful. So we really want to make sure that we're providing them with all the information that's that's applicable in their situations. So obviously these financial aid offers look different depending on the colleges that the student has applied to. And the difficulty of not having that one unified format to offer families makes it a little bit more complicated when they're exploring them. But regardless, the most important piece is to break out all of that information that is universally applied. So in terms of, like the gift aid, the student loans, the self-help money, breaking that out and explaining what it really means. After that comparison has been done and the conversation with net price has been had, moving on to the student actually accepting the aid and what that looks like. This is generally where we see a lot of questions surrounding this in terms of, okay, this is great, we have these offers, but what are the next steps? And again, this looks different at every school. But at this point, having the student accept this aid, letting the college know, hey, we're into the offer that we got from you. And we're looking to move this process forward so that the school can then go down and pull those federal student aid dollars. So once that happens, a school can process this accepted aid and apply it to the bill. So in terms of the actual process that takes, again, it varies. The majority of schools use some sort of portal format at this point. But one thing that we always like to remind students of in particular is that the schools may email or call or a number of different ways to communicate if there is documentation that's missing moving along in this process. And one big piece of that is they might even create a university email for the student once they've accepted admission. And this communication might be going to their new university email address. So something to be aware of and definitely have students keep an eye out for. At that point, the aid can be processed and it will appear as pending. And then the all-important piece of applying for aid again in the following fall. I see this a lot of the times that families don't actually always realize that you need to go and apply every year, that for as long as they're intending on it, applying for federal student aid. So after this whole process is done, particularly where the seniors are sitting right now, we're really looking at these financial aid offer letters. So we're going to go over a few of them today in terms of what they look like. And when we're sitting down with a family who receives one of these offers, the pieces that we find are really important to point out. As well as help them consider not just right now, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years in the future when it comes to making decisions regarding financial aid and paying for college. So we'll talk about a few different things, such as the benefits and the drawbacks, different pieces of information, how to read them properly, and again, how we usually go about this process and having these conversations with families. So we have a diversity of different basically hypothetical offers that have been rebranded in the past few years, and what they look like, and beneficial ways to break them out to help families read them. So the first one that we'll look at here is a hypothetical offer for Gryffindor College. I really love the way that this one is broken out. It does a really good job of breaking up the different types of aid, as you can see in the different buckets, as well as really thorough information on things like, cost of attendance, what, the self-help money is there for, like the student loans, having that broken up from the work study. So basically you get a really good comprehensive look at what's going on in terms of what a bill will look like. Again, there's just no standard template when it comes to financial aid offers. So sometimes looking at one of these and looking at another one side by side is not exactly an easy thing for a family that doesn't, sit down and do this every day to do. But it's important to be able to identify the similar pieces and compare them that way. And so for that reason, I really love the way that this offer is broken out. So you can see in terms of the cost of attendance, they do a good job of breaking up the direct and the indirect costs here. So I also love that this offer says that the direct costs are what appear directly on the bill. So there's things like the tuition and fees and room and board if the student is going to be living on campus. This again makes it a lot easier to be able to compare pieces like net price. The indirect costs are, again, something that are really critical, particularly for families to consider and be aware that they're there. But it's really great that they highlight that these will not appear on the bill. So this isn't basically part of that comprehensive cost. And then we'll look at the gift aid right here. So all of the free money. So you could see these different breakouts between things like the federal grant money. So like the Pell Grant, the Maine State Grant, and then different supplemental pieces like this individual received a Quidditch scholarship. So this would be something that we would obviously encourage the student to connect with the university about and ask questions about what exactly this means for them. So were they receiving this likely because they are playing some sort of sport at school, and this sport will need to continue. They will need to continue to play this sport in order to receive this money. Is that something that they intend to be doing? But regardless, when we're looking at gift aid like that, it's really just important to remind the families to stay informed. Ask questions like, what is this and how did I get it? Again, can you rely on it year after year? And is it dependent on a certain behavior? So things like maybe the student is in a particular major and they need to continue to stay in that major to be able to receive some of those funds. Is it based on a sport? Is it based on, other merit pieces like grades? So considering those pieces and how the student continues basically through college in terms of what they're participating in it or how they are behaving in terms of like grades. Is the cost of that program sustainable over time? These are additional questions that you'll want to consider to think about, as well as dependent on if any of this money is renewable. And then,
Michelle, we have one
yep,
more question before. So it's,
sure.
did the financial aid package vary from year to year, or do they stay the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Flo. So I would say that the majority of the time these packages do vary year to year. It depends on a number of different things, right? So it depends on the school and if they're keeping tuition and fees the same throughout the period of time, but it also depends on other things like, granting of scholarships. Sometimes what we'll see is an incoming freshman will come in with a lot of money that first year, but maybe not all of those scholarships are renewable, so they won't have access to them maybe their sophomore, junior, or senior year. Similarly to that, things like student loans, your eligibility for the federal student loan program, which we'll talk a little bit about later when it comes to paying the bill, that eligibility actually expands over time in terms of your financial aid. So that's part of the reason why, reapplying every year is important because it is going to look a little bit different. Thank you for that question. All righty. So in terms of self-help aid, the reason why it's called self-help aid is because it really is broken out into a way it's you helping yourself, right? So a couple of different options for that are things like the loans that are available and the work study piece. So regarding that, talking a little bit about the logistics of work study, but the biggest piece that we like to tell families is that work study does not come directly off your bill. So when, an offer in particular kind of lumps it together, you're not going to be using it to actually apply to the bill because it's an earned paycheck. That's something that a lot of the times, students don't realize. So it's really, really important to share that information. Again, we always suggest that people take advantage of it to use it for things like paying for books or, like living expenses or their laundry. So it definitely is a huge help. You could even, in an ideal world, save that money until the following semester and use it towards paying that bill. But again, you won't have access to that up front. You can also see on this offer the breakout of the loans. I also really love here that it also says must be repaid, just to be clear so people understand the terms that they're accepting. But here are the federal direct loan programs that you can see it's broken out between subsidized and unsubsidized. And that really, that difference is based on the way that interest accrues. Is the interest accruing immediately upon disbursement of the loan, which is the case in the unsubsidized, or in the case of the subsidized, is that interest not accruing until 6 months after graduation. But ultimately, when it comes to these programs, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but if the student does have to borrow money, we always suggest that they start here. These direct loan programs have a lot of benefits, some of which being things like, the lowest fixed interest rate you're really going to be able to get. They're not credit based, so the students are able to take them out as the primary borrower, which is huge, that they don't need things like a cosigner, and they're, again, not credit based. With the direct loan programs, there are also access to things like forgiveness, flexible payment programs. and additional deferment and forbearance if necessary after graduation. Again, things that you wouldn't really be able to access with the private lending piece. So again, regarding these loans in particular, the eligibility for them increases again over that educational period. So if you are eligible, so the typical dependent student anyway is eligible for $5,500 of a direct student loan in their freshman year of college. It'll then increase to 65 in their sophomore year and 75 in their junior and senior year. There are additional ways and situations in which that is an increased amount. So an independent student would actually receive a little bit more on the loan side. And, you know, in a situation that a dependent student who has a parent that is actually declined for a parent plus loan, that could also increase their eligibility in the direct lending program. Alrighty. And then the only other piece I actually wanted to mention about this offer is the highlighted yellow pieces on the right-hand side and how these provide, you know, those basic assumptions in which the award is based off from. So it's critical to double check these pieces and make sure that they're still accurate because these are also pieces that might change for the student. So things like dependency status, things like on-campus housing, is that still accurate, or are they planning to commute, or maybe they're going to rent an apartment? So those are things to consider as well. Even things like grade level, if they were either transferring in or maybe they did some sort of, you know, dual enrollment program, or they were coming into college with some amount of college credits. Does that actually change their grade level status? So definitely things to think about because that would impact their eligibility for aid. All right, so now we're going to look at a secondary offer here. In terms of looking at how this is set up, but, you know, pretty significantly differently than the other offer. You know, it includes all the same information, which is awesome, but looking at it can be a little bit confusing, especially if you've received the other type of offer and now you're looking at this. That kind of generally lumps a lot of this information together. So in this particular award, you can see things like still the separation of the direct and the indirect costs here. Similarly broken out, just not necessarily as specific. It might not necessarily be clear to a family member that which pieces appear on the bill versus the pieces that are those just additional expenses. So again, you can see the tuition and fees and then the room and board broken out here for the anticipated annual cost of $58,376, and then your additional expenses of those books and supplies, the transportation, and miscellaneous cost of being in college. We have that piece again based on the assumptions. It has listed, you know, assuming that the student is coming into college full time, assuming that they're living on campus for their housing. Again, you'll just want to make sure that information is accurate and relay that back to the college if it is not, because that can impact aid. So looking a little bit about these pieces as well, this is kind of where they're lumping all their aid together. You can see like a grant, a loan, scholarship, work study. So teasing those little pieces out is going to be important, and we'll do that later to look at kind of one of the best ways to help a family determine what the net cost is looking like, because looking at it right here, looking at this $44,095 is like, wow, I'm receiving a lot of money to be able to cover the cost of this schooling. But again, pieces like work study won't be available to pay the bill. These student loans will have to, you know, those are pieces that will need to be repaid. So at a glance, sometimes it can look a little bit better than it actually might be. So knowing how to have that conversation with families and show them how to keep track and accurately compare one offer next to another is really important. So looking at the additional pieces in terms of what they provide at the bottom here. So this obviously wouldn't be kind of like a standalone document. There likely would be additional information here. They say on the reverse side about those next steps to accept the aid and what the student is going to need to do.
We have one more question, Michelle. It
Sure.
says, why they don't give all the students the max amount of federal loans?
So that's a good question. One piece I would just start out by saying is the subsidized loan is actually based on financial need. So that's kind of how they determine how much a student can receive based on, like that subsidized piece. The unsubsidized piece is not need-based, so they will be able to receive up to that money regardless of the family's financial situation. But again, that's subsidized, so that loan that the interest isn't accruing while they're in college is based on the family's ability to pay. And again, all based on that SAI number that is generated by the FAFSA. I can't exactly address 100% why they choose to do it that way. But again, it is based around financial need. Okay. And then this is the third and final offer that we're going to talk about today before we basically simulate how we would break out a conversation of comparing these offers side by side with the family. So regarding addressing these separate parts, this is almost like a mashup between those other two offer letters that we were just looking at. Again, provides all the same information, which is awesome, but really does kind of mix it in there and provides a lot of information when you're looking at it. So you can see right at the top there, you're looking at the direct and the indirect cost again. Here it is kind of all lumped together, not even really totaling it out. But you could see tuition and fees here at the 17, room and board at the 9, and then those indirect costs. They do label them as out of pocket versus billed, so that is helpful. And then the other educational expenses as well, they have that broken out there. So the other pieces that I like to bring up are things like this on-campus housing grant. So that would be a sneaky one that you would want to look at. And again, considering over a long period of time, especially if this is a 4-year institution that your student is intending on continuing through, do they have the intention of living on campus all 4 years? If not, how is that going to affect their aid? So, keeping that in mind. So if they are intending, that at least that first year, that's something that they wouldn't need to adjust for. But just be aware that that's something you would want to let the financial aid office know if the student is not intending on continuing to live on campus. You can see that is additional information that's provided at the bottom of the offer letter there. It says on-campus resident grant is for students living in resident halls. So specifically for that purpose, and that was for $1,200. So other pieces to consider are the fact that, and this is something that I'm frequently actually having these conversations with families, is it billed by the year? Is it billed by the term? Why is the financial aid offer broken out like that? Because you can see you have a column for fall, you have a column for spring, and then you have a totals. When we're looking at the financial aid offer, we like to look at it by year so we can help the family fully prepare for the cost for school, not just for even the year, but the full, 2 or 4 year education. But it is important to relay that they are billed by the semester or the term. So in this situation, it would be fall and spring would be those terms, and when they would be receiving that aid. So this other information on the side here is also very helpful. They have the assumption here that what used to be the EFC now would be the SAI, but basically stating that this is the number that they're basing this offer off from. So this is important to double check and make sure this is right, especially with everything that's been going on this year in terms of these numbers being changed and adjusted depending on what's going on in the back end of the FAFSA. So as you start to receive these offers, just double check and make sure that information is still accurate for you. They also have information on the side about other financing options. So they have information about payment plans, which, believe it or not, when I'm when I'm working with families, I find a lot of the times that they are not aware of tuition payment plans and, the really awesome benefits that a lot of the times they can provide, being an interest-free option. So I'm always encouraging families to check those out and have a look at them. And even if it's not the whole bill, but it's some of the bill, that can save them a lot of money over time. So definitely have a look there. So it's great that they put that right on their financial aid offer. Other pieces, so they talk about like the private student lending option and military national service benefit as well. Any other questions, Flo, before we move on to breaking these out piece by piece?
Nope, we're all set.
All right, thank you. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to open a tab to show you kind of these offers next to one another and what they look like, and usually how we walk families through looking at the price. So I'm just going to toss these up on the screen. So let's see here. So these are the offers that we were just looking at. I only grabbed 2 of them for the sake of time, but using that and the tool that we have on our website, sorry about that. So using the tool that we have on our website and using those offer letters that we were looking at, looking at these side by side is a really awesome way to go about it. So I really love this tool and I can't be a big enough proponent of it, but this is basically a worksheet that's a downloadable worksheet that's available again on our website that helps you compare costs of the financial aid offer, because again, like we talked about, a lot of them don't necessarily break them up by category, and it's not very clear, which pieces are maybe, the gift aid and how does that impact net price and all these other questions. This dynamic worksheet is a really good way of just kind of like leveling the playing field, pulling all that information out of the offer, and then, getting to the nuts and bolts to be able to compare those net prices side by side. So again, really cool tool that's on our website. And not only is it a worksheet, but it's literally a calculator, so you don't have to do the math, which is really nice. So if we were to be looking at the award from, Gryffindor College, we would be looking at the tuition and mandatory fees piece. So let's see, that would be the direct costs down here. So that would be the tuition and fees plus the room and board, again, assuming that the student is intending on, living on campus. So let's see, that would be the 11,747. And then for the room and board, that is the 1155 number. So that's what you're looking at in terms of those direct costs, which again, this offer does a great job of breaking those right up and telling you that those are the ones that appear on the bill. So when we're calculating net price, it's really that direct cost minus any of that free money. So that gift aid, that's, the grants and the scholarships, those 2 pieces that you do not have to repay. So they also did a really nice job of breaking up the gift aid right here. It's its own little section, totally added up for you. So you can just plug that in. 11,745 is what you're looking at for gift aid. So you can see that that total right there brings it to that $11,257 a year for the estimated total cost. So that's the out-of-pocket cost. Usually, again, if we're working with families, it's nice to fill this out as completely as possible, just to give them an idea. So what do you have accessible in terms of the federal direct lending program? How much is that going to be to give you an idea of, like that gap that you might need to fill? But for the sake of today, looking at that net price in terms of what is truly going to be the cost for 1 year of that school to you is really good to look at. So when we're looking at the next school here, you can see that their estimated annual direct cost is broken up like very similarly to the last offer that we were looking at. So basically it is the tuition, the fees, and then the room and board for the total of the 58,376. So again, as long as none of their plans have changed, you can enter the tuition and fees. I think that's 4440. So again, that is the 43,740 plus the 700 number. When you're looking at room and board, that's that 13,936. And there you have it. Sorry, I forgot a 4 in here. That seems more right, even though it is a very high and stressful number. So that puts that direct cost for 1 year at 58,376. And then again, minus the gift aid. So this is the part that gets a little bit trickier with this offer. So this is the number right here. You're looking at, so it's that grant, the Pell Grant, and then the scholarship that they received. And it looks like a lot on paper, that 22,000, and then you get the 9,000 and the 6,000. But let's see what that looks like when you're comparing it to the direct cost. So we have 37,345. Alrighty, so the net cost before loans, you can see that right here on this line, is $21,031 for 1 year. So you can see it's about 10 grand more than that other college option. So this is something that we would want to highlight to a family as a very important line, particularly when going about making that decision. Is that $10,000 something that's sustainable for you over that potentially 4 years, 2 to 4 years, depending on what type of degree the student is seeking. And again, is that something that you can actually make work in your budget? Do you have savings? Do you have those other pieces? But this is generally a good place to start in terms of having that conversation, and a good place to put all of that information once you start getting those offers. Again, once all this information is filled out, you can save it to your computer, you could print it, but it's good to have it to hold on to. Again, this sheet is available on our website. So we'll leave here. And then we'll move on. So now that we have an idea in terms of how expensive the school might be, or we have an idea of how much the net price is, how do we pay that balance? So making that decision, even after, maybe the family's had a conversation and they opt to go with one school or the other, what do you have for resources and tools in your toolbox about how to pay that balance? So one of the ones that, obviously we can't be enough of a broken record about, and I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Worthington, but the Worthington Scholarship Foundation is a huge push for us in terms of helping students pay that bill. So full disclosure, the deadline was on April 15th. So that deadline has passed at this point. But there are a lot of, updates going on in the back end of the FAFSA in terms of, SAIs changing and this, that, and the other thing. So eligibility might not necessarily be at exactly where it was in the past for students. So in terms of actually being eligible for the scholarship, the student would need to go to a partner high school. So it's, typically a lot of those public schools in the state of Maine. They would also need to be intending on attending a partner college. So the partner colleges are listed on the right-hand side there, and in addition to any of the Maine community college system schools. But you can see that right on that side. There are also requirements regarding grade point average, depending on if the student wants to go to community college or a 4-year institution, as well as the SAI requirement as well. But ultimately, the reason why this is such a great tool in terms of, bridging that gap and paying the bill is because if, say, the student was opted to go to the Gryffindor College, the one that had that $11,000 a year bill, if they received the Worthington, which is good for up to $5,000 a year, that nearly cuts that bill in half. So that's a huge place to start looking. Another resource we love to share with people are the folks at Maine Community Foundation. They offer a very, very great and comprehensive scholarship search that is available for Maine-based students. So again, it's keeping that pool a little bit smaller. Not that it's not worth applying to some of these more nationalized scholarships, but Maine Community Foundation does a really great job of making it clear what scholarships might apply specifically to you. So they have a lot of great tools there. You can actually go on, basically sign up for an account, and it'll automatically generate a list of scholarships that would be a good match for you to apply. They also have really wonderful resources like scholarship workshops. But there's a lot of diversity ultimately on this website, not just for high school seniors, but also students who are going into their sophomore year and beyond. Non-traditional students. A lot of really good options. So we always suggest people have a look there as well. It would just be a shame if we left out our website and our scholarship search. So FAME has its own Maine scholarship search, again, available for Maine students in particular. So really, really love this resource. And a lot of them may even be going unawarded. So that's definitely something to keep your eyes on and encourage, your students to apply to. So one good example I know a lot of us like to give about this is the Maine Legislative Memorial Scholarship Fund, because it has been historically going unawarded. It does have a June 1st deadline. But ultimately, it's 16 scholarships that are available, one for each county. And over the past couple of years, only in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 have been going awarded. So, anywhere in the neighborhood of 10 being unawarded every year. So sometimes the student might be the only applicant. So it's definitely worth having a look at some of these. And then looking a little bit more nationally and broadening those horizons after you've, exhausted some of those more localized resources for your students. I know a lot of us here like the You Can Go To website. The reason why this one is nice is because sometimes you might have a student come to you and say, oh, well, there's nothing available right now. I missed the deadlines, that sort of thing. You can actually search the scholarships by the deadline. So you can go right on here and click, into July and see what's available in July. So even in those more uncommon months, there are things that are available. So if you think it's too late, it's worth having a look, even if the pool is a little bit larger. And then different organizations like Maine Municipal Association, or just reputable organizations that exist in the area. Really, really great place to have a look. So this is one scholarship on here, the Douglas M. Memorial Scholarship. So this is for anybody who's planning on going on after college to seek a job in public or municipal service. So working for the local government. So things like this are a really, really great place to look. You can even try just, Googling their major, typing scholarship, as silly as that sounds, that also works a lot of the time. Ooh, and then this one is really great. I love talking about the employer benefits. Oh, Flo, did you have a question that came up?
Yes, one more question about scholarships. So
Sure.
a lot of scholarships are for Maine colleges. My daughter has chosen a program that's not in Maine, that's not offered in Maine. Are there any options for that case? She is being forced out of state in order to do her program. So there is the break too, so they can try that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Depending on her program, if it's not available in the state of Maine and she is going to a partner college, she might also be eligible basically for any of the in-state benefits, depending on her situation. So that's more of a case by case. But I would say that, going on and looking at a lot of these different scholarships, some of them might be available just for people who went to high school in the state of Maine, so graduating Maine high school seniors, but not necessarily students who are planning on going to Maine-based colleges only. So definitely access those resources and just see what the eligibility requirements are, because again, not all of them are blanket. Graduated in Maine, must be going to a Maine college. And bottom line is it would still be worth applying to some of these and explaining that situation. Just stating that, your daughter's program isn't available in the state. So that's why she's opted to go to an out-of-state school. Alrighty. If no other questions on scholarships, another one that's, like in the similar bucket are these employer benefits. I like to look at these on sides of both the student and the parent. So where does the student have a part-time job? Are they looking for a part-time job? Are they planning on working a part-time job while they're in college? And do they want to target a job based on, some sort of benefit like that? So does the employer either have a scholarship foundation? Do they provide some sort of professional development funds or tuition assistance programs? These are all available and out there. On the screen are a few of them that have, some of these pretty comprehensive programs, and are typically in the same areas as where colleges are located. So definitely something to think about. But again, also considering where the parents work and where the families work, approaching the employer, asking, hey, do we have any sort of benefit like that? Is there a scholarship fund? Is there something that might apply for my child? Is definitely worth an ask for as well. Another piece is approaching, the credit union that you bank with. I know a lot of local credit unions provide scholarships for students as well. Another piece we have to talk about is savings. So the Next Gen 529 is a huge piece to consider. And, it's never too late to open one, no age restriction there. And there's a lot of opportunity for matching grants. So things like, you open the account with $25 and then they'll automatically put $100 into it just to get you started. You can also receive up to $300 in matching grants every year. So basically, if you invest $1,000 into that account, you can get to up to 30% of that back. And even automating payments, you get $100 just for doing that, having it come directly out of your account. Ultimately savings, what we always suggest is having people apply their savings directly up front to their bill. And the reason why we suggest this is because it helps basically defer the loans that you're going to be taking out, so they won't necessarily be accruing interest while your student's in school. So the earlier the better in terms of the savings piece. Other pieces, so learning about the merit aid that's available at the schools that your students are interested in, and what type of wiggle room is available there. If they were able to, by the end of their senior year, pull their B+ average up to an A, what would that mean monetarily in terms of providing benefit? Other pieces to think about when it comes to merit aid is, be in contact with the school, find out about the programs in terms of what type of average does that mean that they need to continue to have while they're going through college? To what extent is it renewable? Questions like that. And then I like to put this little figure here, again, it's talking about comparing those different bills, but really to bring home the message of the free community college piece. But ultimately, like if the student is not planning on living on campus, there can be even ultimately, a negative net price in some of these situations. Say the student files the FAFSA and they receive things like high amounts of, grants or scholarships. There can be money that's actually left over to cover things like transportation, books, and housing. Other ways to keep the cost down are maybe even discuss the option of transferring after 1 or 2 years. So you take advantage of that free community college program. Some of these Maine-based community colleges also have what's called an articulation agreement. So that's basically an agreement between the community college that the student would be starting at and a local university that has a comparable program. So having them start out at that community college and then move on to a 4-year university. So other pieces to think about are considering the entire cost of education versus just the first year. This is really important to consider because, again, like students might come into school with a high amount of scholarships their freshman year, riding off from senior year. And it might be very achievable for them to be able to afford that, but you need to consider how and if it is sustainable over that second, third, and fourth year, because the worst thing that can happen is a student goes to school, falls in love with the school, then realizes they cannot afford to go back. So consider those impacts of, maybe like non-renewable scholarships, and, encourage families to consider plans in terms of, are you using all of your savings your first year? Are you planning on doing loans? Are you doing a mix? Really what's going to work based on their financial situation. And yes, free community college is a very hot topic right now, but the University of Maine system has actually been doing a program similar to this for a while at select campuses. So ultimately how this works is if you're Pell eligible, you basically won't be paying tuition or fees if there's a balance left after that grant aid's been applied at schools like UMA, Fort Kent, Machias, UMP. And I always save this piece for last, talking a little bit about the different lending programs. So on the left-hand side, you can see an infographic from FSA. We do have a lot of useful tools on our website about borrowing as well. So I suggest you check them out, especially if this is an area that you want to learn a little bit more about in terms of, advising students and their families. So you'll see there are three major types of student loans. So we'll talk a lot about that direct program. They all really fall under that bucket. There's the subsidized and unsubsidized, which we've already talked about, but there's also the direct parent plus loan and the direct grad plus loan. So those are both part of the direct plus loan program. The parent plus loans taken out in the parent's name, and then the grad plus loan is naturally for graduate students. I do like to point out that plus loans do require credit and are charged a loan fee a little over 4%. So just things to be aware of when you're considering taking those out as well. And then we also do have the options for private student loans. The quick and dirty about that are they're credit based. They're typically offered through a bank, a credit union, or a state-based agency. Usually the student is the borrower, but they'll need a credit-worthy cosigner. So again, because they're credit-based, they'll need a parent or a grandparent to go in on that with them. And then ultimately, each of them offer different programs. So it might be a different interest rate, a different fee structure, rate type, so variable or fixed, et cetera. So it really depends on the actual institution and the type of program they provide. And one other piece that I like to mention that we have, that's honestly a really awesome tool, is the student loan salary calculator that we have on our website. So generally, we like to advise students that they shouldn't borrow for their entire education more than they will make in their first year salary outside of college. So that's usually where we get started. But this student loan calculator provides a really good opportunity to basically go in and say, hey, this is how much we're thinking about borrowing. What salary would I need to be able to sustain that payment and make it, really achievable for me? So you can see on the screen, basically a current debt of $50,000. And then basically if they borrowed that amount over the period of their maybe their 4-year education with the intent of paying it back over 10 years, their monthly payment would be roughly around $555. And then it gives them some statistics about salaries they would need to be able to sustain that. One thing I like doing, especially with, younger students, so students who are juniors or seniors, and still trying to figure out exactly what their priorities are, what they can afford, all these different things, is going on a website like Career One Stop, doing a little bit of research in terms of their career path that they're choosing, because it can give you figures based on the type of job that you're looking into, based on salary and location. And plugging that information in here into our calculator under where it says expected salary. And then it will suggest to you kind of that upper bound in terms of what you should be borrowing. And again, what would be sustainable for you after graduation. So it's a really cool two-sided tool in terms of depending on what type of information that you're working with or how the student wants to go about it. Alrighty, so that's all I had for you folks today. I know we were kind of rushed at the end there, but I did want to save a few minutes for additional questions at the end if anybody had any.
Nope, it looks like we don't have any questions. You answered them all.
Okay, awesome. Alrighty. All right, well, I will go ahead and
Hold
stop.
on, I think we just had one come.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, two. When should we apply
Stop
for
the recording.